Hi everyone, Ryan here from Fight Game Analysis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Yordenis Ugas. But before we jump into that, if you've been enjoying the content, please go ahead and click on the like button and also subscribe to the channel. Really appreciate your support. Alright, so that's it. This week we're getting it. April 16th, we've got the major unification bout between Errol Spence Jr. and Yordenis Ugas. Man, this is one I've been waiting for ever since we saw Ugas get past Manny Pacquiao. That was a huge win for him. Looked awesome in that fight, and it set this one up. Now, look, we all know about Errol Spence and what he brings to the table. The man has been either the top or right underneath the top, right? 1 or 1A at 147 pounds for some years. Depending on if you like Terrence Crawford, you think he would get it if they fought. A lot of people think Errol Spence would get it. But either way, you've got this man at the very top of the division. And now you've got Ugas coming up. In some ways, I mean, he's 35 years old. Got the background fighting out of the Cuban amateur system. So certainly didn't come out of nowhere. But at the same time, we haven't been talking about him at the top of the division for like 5-6 years for the way we have for some of these other guys. Okay, it was maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago at this point that he hooked up with his current trainer, Ishmael Salas. Now this dude is a world-renowned trainer, and ever since they've hooked up, we've seen Ugas' game improve. We've seen him continue to get better. And that's probably a big reason why he's at this stage right now, biggest fight of his career. Right, so let's talk a little bit about the way Ugas looks, right? Let's talk a little bit about the way he fights. He's a little bit tricky. He's a little bit crafty, right? He's got some nuance to his game. And on the one hand, you could talk about him and you could say he's a little bit basic, right? The school of the fundamentals, so to speak, right? Stands in front of a guy. He'll work behind the jab. He's going to shell up a lot with his defense, right? He's not going to use a lot of footwork, not going to move around. He's going to block a lot of his shots with a high guard and then counter. Now, that sounds relatively straightforward, right? When he can, he's going to work at range with like a jab and a right hand. Nothing all that big, nothing all that special, but it doesn't need to be. It's all about the execution. It's all about how you're able to do the things that you're going to do when you get in there. You know, that's just part of the thing. When you're so good at executing, sometimes the other guy can know exactly what you're going to do, and he's still not going to be able to beat it. So when you look at a guy like Ugas, you can kind of figure out his game a little bit. It's funny, Ishmael Salas gave an interview to Fight Hype about a month ago or so. And they were just asking him, you said that you saw some weaknesses in Spence's game. What do you think it is? And what he mentioned was Spence's aggressiveness. He said, look, everybody talks about how that aggressiveness is an asset. But I talk about that aggressiveness as a weakness. We're going to use that aggressiveness against him. So that tells you right there where his mindset's going. He said he wouldn't reveal the specific game plan, how they were going to counterpunch. But the other thing that he mentioned was that Spence was really good inside. Ugas excelled at mid-range. So if you're going to use a man's aggression against him, and you're saying that you excel at mid-range, that tells me right there, we're going to see in some ways exactly what we saw in the Manny Pacquiao fight, exactly what we saw in the Sean Porter fight. We're going to see a man in Ugas who's stationary, who's allowing that aggression, who's allowing Errol Spence to come forward, allowing him to use that aggression. He's going to have to block those initial shots. Doesn't necessarily use a lot of head movement, doesn't necessarily use a lot of upper body movement, so he's not going to be out there slipping things. Probably going to block those shots and counter. And he's going to want to keep it at mid-range. So if you're being too aggressive, that's going to result in him backing up, maybe pivoting here and there. If you're trying to stay at range, because Spence has the longer reach at 72 inches, maybe he's going to punch over the top of that jab and come in with some good work to the body and work behind that way to get into mid-range. Right? You could basically you could see something like that happening. But that's the kind of thing that we're going to see. That's what we expect from him. He goes very well to the body. Those are all the things we expect to see. Now, what about Errol Spence? What can we expect from him, right? High work rate. Works very good behind the jab. One of the things I've talked about on this channel before is the way that I love the way Spence frames his work. Right? He uses that jab. He gets a guy where he needs him to be. He lines him up, and then he can start to do better work. When they talk about that aggression, he loves pushing guys back. He loves getting them against the ropes and then unleashing with a ferocious body attack of his own. Like, Errol Spence has been known for that body attack since he was in the amateurs. And if you ever watch the amateurs, if you ever pay attention, body work isn't really something that's big there. You look at the pros, body work isn't even really that big in the pros. There's a lot of guys who neglect it, but it's still way more than you see in the amateurs. Part of it is probably the fact that, you have to understand how to throw body punches. You have to know how to set them up, because otherwise if you just come in, you're going to leave yourself wide open for a counter. The other part is that you typically land body punches. You don't think of them as an investment. I'm working to the body because of the damage it's going to do later in the fight, break a man down, stop him. Amateur fights are only 3 rounds. So you really don't do things in the first round where you're planning for 3 rounds as though it's some big, long, drawn out affair. Like, Everything's about scoring those points. Everything's about the way that it looks for the judges. For better or worse, that's the way the amateur system is structured. So, but Errol Spence has been a body puncher ever since he was in the amateurs. Like, you could see it back then. He comes to the pros. He leans on it even more. Goes great downstairs. Does great work to the body. So you know that when he comes in, he's going to be working behind that jab. He's going to set his opponent up. He's going to be aggressive. He's going to try and back him up as much as he can. When he comes in, it's going to be behind hard shots. He's going to throw hard shots to the body, work upstairs. Likes getting into a dogfight, so to speak. Now, you don't really see that from him. That's not what we think of. Like, he's out there just getting in these bloods and guts fights. But that's because of his skill set. That's because of his power. That's because of how tough he is. What I mean when I say he likes a dogfight is the way that he comes in. Loves to get inside and do his work. Doesn't mind a guy throwing punches. Loves to punch with him. Spence is a really good counter puncher too. As much as he's got a high output, as much as we think about him as working behind that jab and backing the guy up, he does some really good counter punching. You think about that shot that he caught Sean Porter with right in the middle of his shots. Nasty work, right? Spence going into this one has the better resume. He's got guys Mikey Garcia, Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, going back, Kell Brook, Algier. He's got a lot of guys that he beat. But he's also got that accident in his past, man. And that was a nasty one. Let's be perfectly honest with each other. He came out and in the preview for this fight, he said that he can't remember the day of the accident and he can't remember 3 weeks after. Like, think about the amount of shock and trauma that your body had to go through to where it shut down your memory for 3 weeks. Like, that's intense, man. That's intense. And he was talking, obviously a lot of people, you look at the car crash, they're really surprised that he made it. All kinds of stuff like that because it was an ugly one. That's a bad one, man. That's a bad one, right? So you got to figure that that's going to affect your body in some way, shape, or form. I think at this point we're a couple years past it, or maybe even like, yeah, I think it's a couple years past. I don't remember specifically when it happened, but it's been quite some time. He's had the one fight since then. Ugas' trainer, Ishmael Salas, came out and said that he thinks the Spence doesn't look quite the same. I'll tell you one thing, man. We saw him at this open media workout a couple days ago, and this dude looked phenomenal. He's been talking about this new nutrition company or coach or whatever that he's been working with, taking care of his diet. He kept mentioning making sure I drink enough water. So he's making sure that he's well hydrated going in there. But he looked smaller than he used to look. But he also looked just so lean, so ripped, so strong. I wonder if he's actually got a lower body fat percentage, but he's got more muscle packed on him in the same frame. He's going to come in there with cardio through the roof. Not that he's ever gotten tired before, but I don't know. I'm really, really excited to see what Errol Spence is going to bring in this one. I'm picking him for the win in this fight, right? And it's for the simple reason that I don't think a guy who stays in front of him, a guy who doesn't move his feet, a guy who just stays in front of Errol Spence, I don't think a guy at 147 pounds is going to beat him like that. I think if Spence loses, I think the man who eventually beats him is going to have to use movement, right? If that's Terrence Crawford, no surprise there. The man uses footwork very well. But Ugas doesn't. He stays in front of you. He likes to counter. He does his work there. He'll pull back little bits to try to stay at that mid-range. He also doesn't have the reach advantage like he had against Pacquiao. Right? Spence is coming into this one with the longer reach at 72 inches. Ugas at 69. So I think Spence is going to be able to get his work done. Ugas is going to be able to land shots. He'll be able to get off. He's a very good fighter. Don't get me wrong. This won't be like Spence wins 11 rounds or something crazy like that, but I expect him to win the fight. He said he's going to come in looking for the knockout. It'll be interesting to see if that happens. That he's out there, that he's calling for it. But I think he's able to come out with the victory in this one. I think he's able to look good, particularly in the face of this level of competition. So let me know what you guys think. Like I mentioned, Ishmael Salas said that Spence looks like he lost a step after that accident. What do you guys think? Did you notice that in his last fight? Do you think that's going to be something that it's hard to come back from at 32 years old? Or do you think he's going to come out here and just, possibly look better than ever? Let me know what you guys think.